Today's guest is Jamie Waggoner. She is an author, pagan priestess, and practicing witch for 25 plus years. Jamie is the author of Hades, Myth, Magic, and Modern Devotion, and a contributor to Witchology magazine, Haunted magazine, and The Feminine Macabre, among others. Jamie is also a co-founder and teacher for Way of the Weaver, an inclusive program of magical study, social justice, and community building. Welcome, Jamie, to the channel. I have to say how I met you and how excited I am to have you here to talk about Hades and channeling the gods because for those that don't know, I met Jamie at Mystic South 2 years ago. It wasn't this year, it was last year. You didn't meet me, but I met you because you were hosting an underworld ritual and it was so badass. And she was channeling Hades. And I walked up to her and you gave me this message, which you had a whole line of people waiting to receive messages from you while you were in that channeled state. And I saw you and I was like, oh, she's badass. I have to interview her. I have to meet her. I need to connect with her. So we didn't really get a chance too much to connect 2 years ago, but then this last year at Mystic South, I was finally able to go up to you and say hi and introduce myself. So welcome to the channel, Jamie. Do you want to briefly talk about who you are, where people can find you, all of those types of things, and anything else you want to share about yourself?
Yeah, thank you so much, Ivy. I'm so happy that you came and introduced yourself to me this year because I we had kind of circled each other on social media and I was like, "Oh, I know who you are, Ivy the occultist."
Yeah.
So, yeah, that was really great. And also hello to everyone who might be watching or tuning into this. Yeah, so I'm Jamie. The bio pretty much sums it up. I'm an author, I'm a pagan priestess, I'm a writer, I'm a tarot reader, all of those things. And I'm lucky enough that that is my full-time job. So I'm a full-time witch. And I live in Alabama, which is actually the home of the Muskogee people. Those are the people that have stewarded this land for years and continue to do so. And I write and teach from here, basically, when I'm not traveling around. So, and I've been a devotee of Hades since 2016. So
Mm.
it's been a minute. And I am just really, really happy to be here today and to talk Hades and the underworld with you.
I know that there's some basic questions that you probably get all the time, so we're just going to go right into it. I want to know okay, you've been devoted to him for 9 years. What drew you to Hades specifically? And were there any moments where you said that was the one for you? Or was it maybe more of a slow, gradual process? I know you probably answer this a lot, but for people that are not familiar with anything that you've done with Hades so far, I'm going to give you the floor for that.
Oh yeah, that's totally fine. I'm always happy to tell the story. Hades sort of fell into my lap for a very long period of time. I'm going to kind of date myself here, but I was in college in the late 90s. And around that time was a real resurgence of earth-based spirituality and interest in witchcraft and things like that. There were a lot of feminist scholars at the time that were coming out with like ancient goddess scholarship and things of that nature. And I was a philosophy major in college. I have a degree in
Mm.
philosophy. And as my thesis project, I decided to kind of write a paper about that emergent sort of interest that was happening and what it might mean for culture. And what really began as more of an academic interest for me sort of blossomed into falling in love with the goddess, basically. And this
Yeah.
idea of sort of working in tune with the natural world and the spirits around and following, kind of natural cycles, all of that really appealed to me. I had been raised in a very conservative family, like a lot of witches that I know. Raised in the Southern Baptist Church, so it was very jarring at first to accept like my interest in that and to sort of like start dipping my toe into those waters because it was a little scary. It went against everything that I had been taught and been raised with my entire life. But that's what happened. And also because of that background, I sort of, having worked with or having, been in been in the presence of sort of the Christian God and Jesus and sort of like more of a patriarchal narrative of spirituality, I sort of wanted to put all of the male gods over here.
Sure.
I was like, I've been hanging out with you for almost 2 decades now, and I kind of just want to hang out with the goddess for a while. And so I just kind of, put them in the corner, and my practice really focused around the goddess, and more specifically the goddesses of the Mabinogion, the Welsh cycle of mythology. So we're talking about Bronwyn and Arian Rhod and Rhiannon and Blodeuwedd and Ceridwen, especially Ceridwen. I still love Cara Dune quite a bit, and I see her as sort of a motherly figure to me,
Oh.
which, if you know her story, might surprise you because basically, she basically kind of uh, is she has like an initiatory process with a child where she eats the child and then becomes pregnant and the child is reborn. So she's
Mm.
an odd mother, but it makes sense to me, and it really kind of her energy is something that I immediately recognize. It's very chthonic, meaning it's very like underworldly, underground, earthy type of energy. It has like a certain weight and a certain heaviness to it, right?
Mm.
So I had, and in doing this, I belonged to an organization called the Sisterhood of Avalon, which is an inclusive women's mystery tradition where we kind of studied these goddesses and worked ritual with magic with them. And that's how that's kind of my pagan conversion story, right?
Yeah, of course.
So yeah, so fast forward to quite a bit later, and I was on the ritual facilitation team for a witchcraft camp in Vermont, a summer camp. And part of what we were tasked with on that team was to develop sort of like develop ritual over 7 days that would kind of weave a story and like weave magic and sort of get everybody sort of it like get them included in the story and kind of following like what was happening. And this year that I was on that team, the story for camp was Persephone's descent.
Mm.
And so, the team and I, we're having meetings prior to camp, and we're kind of like trying to figure out what we're going to do for ritual, what we're going to do on each night, how we're going to weave the story, what would be interesting and compelling for folks. And we eventually decided that each of us would take one character out of the myth and really study them and really sort of work with them and bring that energy not only to the planning team but to the camp itself, like when we were there. And at that point in time, and just like the makeup of the team, I was a bit younger then, and I was like, oh, well, they're probably gonna ask me to be Persephone, like because I'm feminine presenting, and I was roughly around the
Sure.
right age. And but no, somebody else wanted Persephone.
Wow.
Which was fantastic. It was this lovely, one of my very best friends. I love them a lot. Wonderful, beautiful, non-binary fairy of a person,
Love
and
it.
they wanted Persephone, which was great, right? And I was like, cool, we're gonna do some gender bending with this story. This is gonna be fun. And I still waited while everybody kind of picked the roles they wanted, and nobody picked poor Hades. Like, no one. I waited till the very end, and he was like the last kid on the playground. Nobody picked him. And I was like, well, we can't have the story without Hades. Like, and since I had been working with sort of these deep earth energies, with Caradwyn and some of the other like goddesses of sort of the cycle of the year, um, that type of energy, I didn't find it intimidating or scary. I felt like I had familiarity with it. So I was like, oh, I'll do Hades, that's great. So to prepare for camp, I started reading the mythology and I started trying to figure out what magical correspondences would have the same resonance as Hades energy, right? Because I work a lot with corresponding elements. I work mostly with herbs. I'm really into esoteric herbalism. So
Mm.
the first thing I did was go, to my herbal cabinet and try to figure out like what kind of incense can I make to sort of draw him close? Like what are the associations with him? And I quickly found out that there is very little information about Hades, like at
Mm.
all. And for him to have such a large role in Greek mythology and in sort of the cosmology of that mythology, because he's one of three brothers that rule the three realms, right? Zeus rules the sky, Poseidon rules the seas, Hades rules the underworld. It's a huge role, and yet there's like nothing about him. So I started experimenting with things, again, crystals, chanting different things to kind of see what was fitting. And I also, another big tool that I use all the time is trance journey. So it's
Mhm.
basically, I go into a meditative state and I, sort of go into the other world where, you can talk with non-corporeal beings, you can get information, things like that. So I ended up chatting with Hades a lot. And what's funny about in my experience with deities, with unseen ones, if they are someone that is still current and talked about and really known, it's much easier to connect with them than
Sure.
it is if it's somebody that's a little bit more esoteric and not necessarily talked about. And so my initial talks with Hades were kind of slow, right? And they sort of, we kind of like we sort of danced around each other a little bit, but then he started to get to know me, I started to get to know him, and we ended up, by the end of that summer, because the camp was at the end of the summer and I started planning this early in the summer, it was pretty easy to get to him. It was pretty
Yeah.
easy to get there and talk and figure out like, what sort of things would draw him here to our rituals and all of that. So I go to camp and camp was, it was amazing. It was probably the rituals that we performed in that camp were probably some of the most like ecstatic experiences that I've ever had as a magical practitioner. And indeed, like in a few of the rituals, I was in like trance possession with Hades. So,
Mhm.
in my framework for practicing magic, what that means is I allow like the consciousness of the deity to descend into my body and use my voice and my body to speak to the participants in the ritual container.
Mhm.
And so I got to not recognize, I got to experience firsthand what he's like, right? Which is, it's incredible. It's like super intimate. And I could feel his feelings. I could hear his voice in my head before the words were spoken. It's like having like two consciousnesses, if that's a word,
Oh
that
yeah. Yeah.
are like kind of right there. And like he's kind of in front and I'm kind of behind. That's kind of what happens in trance possession. And so, I had gotten to know him in the other world for a few months, but feeling what he felt was a completely different experience, because he felt so much love and responsibility for the mortals that were
Mm.
talking to him. And he also was very circumspect. His perspective is almost like geological time, like it's really long. And also the love that he has for Persephone is, it's hard to even describe it. It's there's almost no words. It's almost pure emotion. Like, your heart's going to burst out of your chest, your eyes are welling up with tears. Like it's incredible.
Mm.
And so after having experienced all of that with him, was super, super powerful. But the other part of working with Hades is he's very controversial, right? So, people, when people are working with him, they're oftentimes working with shadowy energies or
Mm.
deep-seated fears or suppressed desires and things like that. So there was, some projection of those things onto me as a person. And so, I had to kind of navigate that too, right?
Sure.
And so when we got home from camp, I was grateful. I said, "Thank you, Hades. This was incredible. Like, thank you for this experience. But I'm not sure that I have room for this in my life, right? I'm not sure that I can incorporate this into my magical practice." And, I did a whole like ceremony where I like, all the things that I had used at camp, all the little tools and different things. Like I took them to a cemetery and I did like a releasing ritual
Oh.
with.
Okay, so we just had technical difficulties. I don't know what's going on. It might be my end, it might be Jamie's end, we don't know. But I lost Jamie for a second, but we're back.
Did you get the part where I said that I like drew a line and was like, no, we're done? Like,
I think you were just there, so continue there. Yes.
okay, yeah, this is my office.
Hello. Okay.
This is my office. Um, so it was supposed to be a dining room, but it makes a much better office. So I tried to walk away from Hades. It was an amazing experience, totally life changing, but like I said, I just wasn't sure that how it would fit in my life and if I wanted that. It's a lot, right? It's a
Yeah.
lot working with a god like Hades. But time passed and he didn't really leave me alone. I would run into him in the other world a lot. He would be in my dreams. When I set even harder boundaries, he sent Persephone instead to
Mm.
talk to me. And so it kind of went like that for about a year. And I was like, all right, I had had some time to think about it, and my husband and I were going on a trip to Italy, and we were going to be near some of the sacred sites of Hades and Persephone and Greek mythology, because it's people misunderstand that it's only in Greece. It's kind of all over the Mediterranean that these
Sure.
stories take place. And I was like, okay, Hades, like I have a really big ask. I have something that I really, really need, and it was a very practical thing. And I'm like, so we'll go to a temple, we'll make an offering to you, we'll do it, in this style that you're accustomed to. And if you can deliver on this ask, then I will consider working with you.
Really?
Um, yeah, and we went to the specific place, which actually was a place that I had a piece of information that I had received in a dream, which I had to Google when I woke up. Uh, so we went to the place, and it was the cave of the Cumaean Sibyl in Cuma
Mm.
in Italy, and we went there, we made the offering, and we got home, and it was not even a month later that the petition was granted, that what we needed was granted. And so I was like, okay. So just it was I had like some trepidations, right? I was, I'm like, okay, there's the signs and the symbols and the synchronicities are all there, but I still felt a little bit of trepidation. And so I was like, all right, we're gonna make this official. I'm gonna do a ritual of dedication, and I'm gonna make a contract. I'm gonna make, things for me and things for you.
Yeah.
Because I'm a Capricorn. I like contracts. I like sure things. And I had four of my friends came and witnessed the whole like ritual. And I describe in my book, in one of the chapters, how to do a ritual of dedication if that's something you're feeling drawn to, and some of the pros and cons of being dedicated to a god in that way. And it was for a period of 9 years. And that was in 2018. So in March, this coming March in 2026, will be the eighth anniversary. And I'll enter my final year of the contract. But I'm pretty sure we're going to renew it
Yes.
at this
Wow.
point.
Wow.
So, yeah. And, it's been really interesting journey with Hades. Because again, like it was kind of at first, like it just seemed like oh, it's a coincidence. I'm just going to do it for this one period of time and then it's going to be over and it's not going to be a big deal. But it ended up like completely changing my entire life and my entire magical practice.
Mm. Oh man, I was gonna ask you this question way later, but now I just really want to know what you think. Do you think the gods choose us or that we choose the gods? Or do you think it's more of a mutual thing? Because this can be kind of a spicy question. Some people believe only the gods choose you and that's it, or vice versa, that we have the power. So what do you think about that?
I think it's both, honestly.
Hmm. Hmm. I mean, it sounds
I
like it from
think
your story. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's both. I think that sometimes gods show up in a big way and try to get your attention.
Hmm.
And then sometimes, on the opposite end of that, you can be attracted to a certain god or a certain story or a certain energy and want to pursue it more. And it's kind of like human relationships, right? You see somebody you want to be friends with or you want to date or have a romantic relationship with, and sometimes you reach out to them, sometimes you're the one flirting, and then sometimes you're on the receiving end of it, right? I think it
Sure.
works the same with the gods in my experience.
Yeah, no, I would kind of agree with that. I mean, I had a similar experience with Thoth because I've been dedicated to Thoth for about, I think it's been almost three, oh, maybe. No, I think it's been 3 years. So it hasn't been that long. And I don't really talk about it online very often. I think once that relationship matures a little bit more, I'll be a little bit more comfortable. But at this time, I don't want to assert myself as any sort
Yeah.
of authority figure. So I usually try not to. But I was definitely pursuing Thoth. It was something that I was obsessed with, enthralled with. And so I felt like I chose him. And even in the beginning, I felt maybe a little bit of resistance, a little bit like maybe he wasn't ready to work with me in the state that I was currently in. But then later on, now that I'm thinking back to it, did I choose him? Because he was in my thoughts obsessively for months before I actually started to do trance work to try to connect with him. So now I don't really know if I chose
Yeah,
him or if he was subtly influencing my thoughts and behaviors, if that makes sense.
yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
no, it makes total sense. And I talk about this a little bit in my book, again, especially in
Mm.
the chapter about dedicating yourself to God.
Hmm.
Um, there were some very early signs that, that Hades would be in my life, but that wasn't really on my radar. So I didn't really think that much of it. Probably the most like glaring example, and this is a tidbit that's not in the book, is my college roommate was named Persephone.
Oh, seriously? Oh my gosh. Wow.
And that's like her given name, like her government
Wow.
name is Persephone.
Wow. Interesting.
And I
So,
didn't really, at the time, I was just like, oh, that's cool. Your mom gave you a goddess name. That's rad, but I didn't really think anything of it.
yeah.
And, when I was a baby witch and I did my very first ritual, which was at Samhain in 1999, I did like sat down. I had like it was kind of like more of a the only thing I really knew at that point in time was like Wicca-esque sort of magic, right? Like I had read like Scott Cunningham's books. And so I
Sure.
set up the altar and did sort of the Wicca ritual and did a trance journey. And it was a non-specific trance journey. You're supposed to go to a field and like some entity would come and speak to you. And it was Persephone. Like
Really?
my very first trance ever. So, I think he's been around. I think he's been, especially because um, well, one thing about me, and this is
Mm.
public knowledge, I'm not shy about talking about it, is that I really struggled with insomnia and night terrors most of my childhood
Mm.
until I was about 18, 19. I barely slept. And during that time, I look back on it now and I felt sort of a presence around the edges of my terror and my anxiety at night, but it wasn't a threatening presence. It was just somebody that was like there. And at the time, I didn't really know what it was, but I wasn't scared of it. But this presence was there with me while I basically, walked through the underworld as a child every single night because this, was something that I dealt with. And when I look back on it now, I'm like, I think that was Hades. I really do think he was there. And he wasn't
Wow.
the source of the terror or the source of the nightmares or anything like that. But I do feel like he was just sort of watching over me and was just there.
Yeah. I have another controversial question that just popped up in my mind. So if you don't want to answer it, then that's perfectly okay. And I will cut this out and that's okay. But you mentioned previously that working with deities that not a lot of people work with, it is a little bit more difficult to connect with them at first because you mentioned almost no one was working with Hades. Nobody was talking about him or anything, and that was more difficult for you. Now, do you find that you've written a book about him, that you're talking about him more, that more people are interested in him? Do you find from people that you teach that they're able to seemingly connect with him a lot easier? As in, are you almost bringing him back to life a little bit with your devotional acts? I know that might be egotistical to think or say, but I'm just curious.
I don't know that I personally am bringing him back to life, which is kind
Maybe
of like
feeding him or
like
something.
a funny pun, right?
Yeah, yeah, for sure.
But I have noticed like an uptake in the interest in Hades, not only from me and like my teaching and the book and things like that, but just in general, like social media, like there are lots of like people that have like underworld, Hades or Persephone sort of Instagram accounts or TikToks or things like that. And it could be the algorithm like feeding them to me, right? Like I
Sure.
could just be, my phone is spying on me and listening to me say Hades all the time. But I think that it's all related and it's not just me. I think that all of us practitioners, devotees, dedicants of Hades, it's not a coincidence that we're getting more vocal and out loud about it at this point in time. Does that make
Mm.
sense?
It does make sense. I know
Yeah.
that we're gonna talk about channeling the gods, and I've got some channeling questions specifically for you later, but I really want to kind of dive into Hades a little bit more since we're on him right now. What do you think are some misconceptions, like some of the biggest misconceptions that you always try to clear up about him?
Yeah. Thanks for asking. So I feel like this is a big part of my Hades ministry.
I figured. Yeah.
Lack of a better term. Yeah. I'm knocking on your door. I'm like, can I please tell you about my Lord Hades?
I love it. It's so great. Preach.
Um, no, I think there are some things that people misunderstand. First of all, people think that he is death himself or the Lord of Death, but that's not true. That's actually an entirely different being named Thanatos, who comes to get you at the end of your life. Thanatos lives in the underworld. He's actually the brother of Hypnos. So, right, we have like the big death and the little death. We have like, because we die and Thanatos takes us. But when we sleep at night, the little death, Hypnos takes care of us. So that's one thing. Hades is more the sort of executive administrator of the underworld. It's his job to make sure that mortal shades are taken care of between lifetimes and that there's not unnecessary overlap between the land of the living and the land of the dead, because, it would descend into kind of chaos if that were to happen. And in ancient Greek belief, if they believed in the reincarnation of the soul. So basically, you would go through the underworld multiple times. And indeed, the state of humanity was more often to be dead than to be alive, right? Like dead was kind of the default.
Yeah.
And so Hades, like one of his epithets is polydegmon, which means host of many. And it refers to the fact that all of the shades are in his realm and being hosted by him between lifetimes. And he takes that role very seriously. So that's really more what he is than a god of death. He's more a god of the dead versus of death. The second thing people think, and again, this is related to ancient superstition, because people rarely said the name Hades. They would refer to him as the unseen one or Pluto, which is, related to his wealth and things like that, because they didn't want to say it. So they do euphemisms were popular. And but the thing about it is, though, he's not in charge of when people die.
Mm.
That's actually the Morai. It's the Fates, right? You have Clotho and Lachesis and Atropos who spin out the lifetime of mortals and cut them at the end. So Hades does not have control over that either. Um, Another really, really big one, I think these are the top three, right? The other really big one is that Hades is equivalent to the devil and the underworld is equivalent to hell. Um, that's a really, really prevalent, that's in just culture and just common understanding, that that's a thing, but it's not. And there's a couple of things that happen. There's a couple of reasons why that happened. When the Bible was being codified and written down and people were deciding what went into the Bible, you have the Hebrew of the Old Testament and the Greek of the New Testament, like two different languages, right? And so there was a little bit that got lost in translation between the Hebrew text, which refer to Sheol, which is a part of the afterlife.
Mm.
And the translators translated Sheol, which is a Jewish concept, into Hades, and they're not really equivalent, right? So that happened first, and then so you have like references to Hades as hell in the New Testament of the Bible, and then also we have Dante.
Mm. Mm-hmm.
And he's a big reason why, because Dante loved to sprinkle in bits of Greek and Roman mythology into his epic poetry and his prose. So Dante's Inferno is another reason why people equate the underworld with hell.
Mm.
But at the end of the day, and you have John Milton and some other people too, so at the end of the day, though, they're just two different mythologies, right? There's ancient Greek mythology and there's Christian mythology. And I use the term mythology as a term of reverence, not something to discount it. Like I am a believer in mythology, right? Like I love mythology. So, but they're just two totally different things. And it was, over the years, that's kind of how we got this idea. And it's still really deeply ingrained in our culture, I think.
Yeah, no, I think you're right because I was going to ask you your perceptions of the underworld. I know that's probably way too big of a question for you to even try to tackle, but you're welcome to if you want to, because I know a lot of people correlate the underworld to hell, and it is two
Mhm.
completely different systems of thought, in my
Mhm.
opinion. So, I mean, for example, 2 years ago when I saw you doing that ritual at Mystic South, it was an underworld ritual where we were
Mhm.
kind of transcending ordinary consciousness and stepping into the underworld.
Mhm.
And I remember there was this part where we were all stomping and the ritual itself was just really, really cool. So, how do you perceive the underworld? Why would someone want to go to the underworld? And what kind of things can you do there, I suppose? What's the point, I guess?
Well, I think first and foremost, the reason you would go, there are probably two big reasons why you would be going to the underworld in meditation or trance journey or in ritual. One would be to speak with the ancestors, which we have historical records of people doing that. That's what they do in Homer's epics, right?
Mm, mm,
They specifically are taught by Circe how to make offerings, how to go to the underworld, how to go and speak to the people they need to speak to. So that's one. And I think the other one would be if you're working with some of the deities or entities that live there, right? So
mm.
Hades or Persephone or the Fates or the Furies or Nyx, Erebus, their children, that would be a reason why you'd want to be down there. And I always caution people because I spend a lot of time in trance journey, not always in the underworld, but in other places too. And sometimes it can be sort of tempting to spend a lot of time there. But you want to remember that you're real, you're flesh and blood, and you're supposed to be having an embodied experience of this lifetime. And so it's really important that you balance that out and that you don't become too obsessed with it.
Mm.
But the underworld, if you're just visiting, for like a short time period, like when we did that ritual at Mystic South, it
Yes.
can be a really powerful place to work with shadow magic, work with desire, work with fears around death and dying, or things of that nature. If you want to work with grief, all of those different things, I think that those are things that can be explored in those types of rituals.
Yeah, no, I agree. There's something just so delicious about it too. And I remember like seeing the spark in your eyes when you were channeling. I don't know if people have told you this or not, but you just have like this spark of mischief. I don't know how else to explain it, but you just looked so amused when you're in that channeled state. Oh, I loved it. It was just such a great ritual. So if anybody ever gets a chance to do an underworld ritual, especially with Jamie, do it because it was so, so cool. So I've heard that your book, I mean, really is like it's a devotional act to Hades, right? So what was that process like? Did you channel him for a lot of the work in your book? And how did he receive that? I mean, I would love to hear about your devotional act to him through this book.
Yeah, let's talk about it.
Yeah.
So I've been a writer my entire life. My former career was in creative direction, graphic design, and writing. So I wrote marketing copy for many, many years.
Hmm.
I wrote copy about window blinds and doors and ceiling fans, all the stuff that's in catalogs or advertisements. So I've been a writer for a long time, but it's always been my dream to write books about the things that are important to me, right? Like not just, writing for my job. So when my life circumstances changed and I was able to become a freelance worker and be self-employed, I was like, okay, now is the time to, pursue that dream of what in my mind really made me an author, really made me a writer, right? And working with Hades for this book, I decided it wasn't my intention to write a book about Hades, even after I dedicated myself to him. It was not part of the contract. However, I thought to myself, I've over the years that I've been trying to study Hades, his role in mythology, his correspondences, how to work with him, when to work with him. Um, I compiled all of this information, and I'm like, there's got to be other weirdos like me out there that would want this all in one place, right? And he's very mysterious. He's hard to find in mythology. I had to look at little snippets of poetry and prose. I had to look at sculpture, I had to look at pottery, I had to look at plays, like other things that make reference to him because he doesn't have a central myth. He gets the most mention in the Homeric hymn to Demeter, but that's actually a story about Demeter,
Yeah.
not about Hades, right? It's about Demeter and her relationship with Persephone and an allegory for the changing of the seasons. So you have to look really hard to kind of get this full picture of who he is. There's actually a lot more written about the underworld than Hades himself. So I put all that together and I was like, okay, I actually have enough at this point in time between my own like personal gnosis, my journey with Hades, and the things that I've found out from researching him that I could put together a book, right? And so I pitched it to Llewellyn. They liked it. And the rest is kind of history. So the what you're talking about with the channeled portions of the book, each chapter opens up with a narrative in first person from Hades' perspective. And one of the things that my teaching collaborator Murphy and I teach, because we do teach people how to be in trance possession in ritual and how to do it safely and effectively. And one of the things that we teach as part of that curriculum is that it's really important to go into trance in the other world and get the story of that particular deity from their lips. And not only the story, but what's important about the story now and for this particular audience, right? Because stories in my perspective, I have an animist perspective of story, they
Mm.
change, right? They change and evolve. Like each time a story is told, it's a different iteration between two people or a person and an
Sure.
audience. And kind of like us, kind of like humans, we evolve from generation to generation. We're still human, but there's like little differences, right? Because two humans are combining to make another human. So stories are kind of the same. And what deities want to be known could shift slightly. So we always go and we always get the story. And so I had this idea of like, it would be really interesting in the book to have Hades say like tell things from his perspective. So I went to him, I said, hey, I want to do this. He was like, great, let's do that, that sounds good. Also, it would be really nice to have a chance to tell my side of the story.
Mm.
And so with every chapter I went again, met him in the underworld, basically in trance, told him what I was writing about in the chapter, what piece of myth I was addressing, and asked him to repeat the story to me in his own words. And then I would come out of the trance and I would scribble down everything furiously and try to
Yeah.
remember everything that was said. And I ended up doing it when I was writing. I turned in my first version of the manuscript, and I only had that in the first half of the book, which really covers myth. And the last half of the book covers more like magical techniques and things like that. And my editors were like, why isn't Hades speaking in all the chapters? Like, we miss him when he's not there. Like, he needs to be in every chapter. And
Wow.
I was like, oh, all right.
That's great.
So yeah, so that's how it ended up being at the beginning of every chapter. And now when people talk to me about the book or ask me about it, oftentimes they're like, I just love the narratives. Like they are my favorite part. Like I
Mm.
love hearing Hades' personality. And a lot of people are like, you should write a fiction book about Hades. And I'm like, I don't know if I can do that, but thank you. That's a very nice
Sure.
compliment.
Sure. So you brought up personal gnosis then. What is some personal gnosis you have about Hades or really the underworld that is not shared by the broader community? Because my podcast partner and I, Justin and I, talk about personal gnosis all the time. And I always talk about, his gnosis with Hecate differs than what the broader community says. So I'm just
Mhm.
curious if you have anything in particular that maybe just isn't super popular about them.
Good question. I'm trying to think. Anything that, well, that's my personal gnosis that you couldn't actually find if you dug really hard, right?
Yeah, sure. Or maybe just something that's not as
Yeah.
widely accepted.
Yeah. So, well, in the book itself, what did make it into the book is, like I mentioned earlier in the interview, I really love esoteric herbalism and I work with herbs in a magical way all the
Yeah.
time. They're really how I kind of understand energetics and like navigate magic and ritual. And there are a lot of herbs that appear in Greek mythology, some of them even in relation to Hades. Those are in the book. But then there are also some that, again, just from my conversations with him and my personal gnosis, that, that I included in there as well, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
So I think that's definitely something.
Yeah.
Herbs like hellebore, like datura. Trying to think of a few other ones. Quince. Actually, quince is a really good example. So one thing that people really don't know about Hades is that he has children.
Oh, I
um,
actually did not know that either. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. So, and I'm not really a student of the Orphic mysteries. And the Orphic mysteries, and also in the very popular Supergiant video game Hades, his son is Zagreus, but that's really more of a Orphic understanding. My understanding is more just from ancient Greek mythology and poetry, not really a mystery cult of any kind. And in what we have in existing records, what we have Macaria and we have Melinoe. And Macaria is the goddess of the good death. So basically, when your soul is settled and at peace, and she often can be found in the Elysian fields in the underworld. And she's, sort of this like respite at the end of a life well lived, right? And
Mm.
actually, um, records of her don't have an additional parent. It only lists Hades as her only parent. So we're not sure like who was the other god. And the other one is Melinoe. And Melinoe is the daughter of Hades and Persephone, or sometimes some of the other poets list it as Zeus disguised as Hades and Persephone. I don't really choose to believe that, but choose your own adventure.
Sure.
And Melinda is interesting because she is actually described as being half black and half white. The white part she inherited from Persephone from the upper realm, and the black half from Hades and the underworld. And she's the goddess of ghosts and nightmares and madness. And
Ooh.
yeah, so she basically hangs out by the river Cocytus, which is the icy river in the underworld, and it's where all of the sort of the shades that didn't have either they didn't have their coin for Charon, they didn't have the proper offerings made, they didn't have the proper burial rituals, so they have to hang out by this river and just drift around because they can't actually cross into the underworld. And so she's their patron. She sort of hangs out with them. She leads them from the underworld into our world at night to haunt the living, basically, so
Mm.
that they make the appropriate offerings and rituals and things like that. So she kind of shepherds them. And so she's a really interesting character. And actually, I have it right here. I wrote a whole article about her for the 2026 Magical Almanac. So if you want to learn more about Melinoe, there's a lot more in here than in Hades. Um, she she has given me sort of the gnosis of there's two meanings of her name. It's a really interesting name. Some people think that it is related to black or to darkness or something like that, like black-minded, dark-minded.
Hmm.
But the other potential interpretation of her name is having the color of a quince. So if you know a quince fruit, it looks a lot like a cross between a pear and an apple, and it's kind of a yellowy green color. And I sort of in working with this idea, the notion came to me that that's kind of what you look like when you die.
Mm.
You're kind of, your skin, if you're not, if it's not the modern world and, the embalming and all the other things, but in the ancient world, as the body decomposed, it would take on sort of a pallor of sickness or a pallor of death. And I think that, that is probably, I think that makes more sense, right, for her name and what her purview is. And, I've worked with quince fruit and quince flowers to work with her, and quince flowers work really well. They seem to kind of soften her fearsome personality a lot.
Wow.
Yeah, and so those little things are like little bits of gnosis. Yeah.
Yeah, that's really, really interesting. I love the use of herbs and fruits, and I don't know,
Mhm.
the way I approach ritual is so Venusian sometimes. I'm like, give me all the flowers and the fruit and all that. So no, I really, really love that. I think that's really
Yeah.
great. Do you mind if we talk a little bit about just the channeling process in general? Because
Sure.
I know so many people are going to have questions about this, and we can kind of just like rapid fire through some of these questions. But I know when people think of channeling the gods, right? They think of trance work usually. They usually think of mediumship as well, like channeling an ancestor. So, what does channeling feel like to you? Like, how would you actually describe the process of channeling the gods and being able to write a passage from Hades in his own words? How does that come about for you?
Oh, well, it's a wonderful question, also a big question. So
Sure.
stop me if I run on, okay?
No worries.
And again, like I said, my teaching collaborator Murphy and I, we teach people how to do this.
Yeah.
So, there are lots of different words that get used for what you saw me do in ritual, right? So, some people call it channeling, some people call it aspecting, some people, I tend to call it transpossession because to me, that's what's actually in operation while I'm doing that. I'm in trance and I'm also being possessed. So, that's why I call it that, just to be very specific. Um, because I feel like with mediumship to me, and at least in my current understanding of it, is something from outside is being perceived by the medium, right? So there's like this something coming in, it's being perceived, and the medium is sort of sharing that.
Mm-hmm.
When you're in transpossession, the deity is not outside of you. It is literally in you.
Yes.
And I mean, you are sort of in real time experiencing their emotions, their reactions, their thoughts, things like that. And I might have mentioned when I was talking about my experiences at the camp that and it feels like this with all deities. I mean, I've done this with many deities, not just Hades. But they're sort of right here in the front, and you're sort of way back here. And there's a whole negotiation process when you're preparing to do this in ritual, where you can negotiate with them, like how much of you basically they can have. Like, is it 50%? Is it 80%? Is it like 95%?
Mm.
Like how much they can kind of take over and be fully present. So yeah, so that's kind of the difference between what I would say like channeled messages, like a medium channels, or like maybe if you're reading tarot and you're just kind of intuition is coming through and you're telling people that. That's a little bit of a different thing than being in trance possession with a deity.
Mm-hmm. I would agree with that because I have experienced rituals. It is one of my favorite. Listen, I don't have many skills in life, but one of my skills is being able to be possessed. Like it is one, I am just so loosey-goosey with my body. I'm like, come in, please possess me. Let's have a great ritual. It's something that just comes really natural for me with some of the entities that I work with. So I agree with you. There's always the question that comes up. I hear from people all the time. How do you discern what are your thoughts versus what are the other entities' thoughts? And I don't know how you feel about this, but for me, it is very different than just sitting down and reading tarot cards and trying to discern divine messages that you might be receiving in that moment versus a full possession. I don't necessarily have to discern. It's pretty organic. I mean, they are the
Yeah.
ones that are doing the thing. So I don't know how if you have better advice than I would in that case, because for me, I'm like, when you're possessed, you're possessed. Like there's for me, there isn't
Yeah.
really any critical thought, but I'd love to hear your thoughts.
Yeah. Well, and it depends on your tradition
Yeah,
too,
of
right?
course.
There are lots of traditions where people do go into full possession and it might be spontaneous, right? With like
Sure.
no preparation before. And those things are wonderful. It's not the way I practice. The way that I practice it, we actually we teach people like a 6 week process of leading up into a ritual where you'll be in trance possession with other participants. And part of the reason why we do that is we want to make it safe for the practitioner and also as safe as we can for ritual participants too. I mean, when we deal with trance possession and having a deity present in a ritual circle, that's some big magic, right?
Right.
It's a big presence, there's big magic, and I always tell people, I get asked a lot, like, is magic dangerous? Well, no, I don't think magic is inherently dangerous, but it's never 100% risk-free, right? So and in that preparation process, there's a series of trance journeys that we take you through of like learning the story, learning, like asking the deity to show you the difference in their energy versus your energy, right? And like over these 6 weeks, because you're spending time with them, you really get to know who they are and who you are. So that when you're in that possessory state, you can make that discernment, right?
Mhm.
And I probably go the deepest with Hades because I've worked with him the most and I know him well. And we also have these background contracts and things that we've made in advance. Um, so I go pretty deep with Hades, but not so much with some of the others. I mean, most recently at Mystics Out this year, I actually did transpossession work with Rhiannon from the
Mm.
Mabinogion, which was great. But there's this whole kind of negotiation process. And, also we negotiate things like touch, like, do you want to touch people? Can people touch you? Like food and drink, like, would you like something to eat? Would you like something to drink? Because for deities, being in like a meat suit is incredible. They get
Yes.
real excited, some of them. Here's a funny thing about Hades that I find interesting every time. He always asks for black grapes because he
Oh,
really likes the way they pop in your teeth. Like when you bite the grape, he
yeah.
like finds that like the pop of the flesh of the grape and the juice to be super fascinating.
Wow. He loves the crunchy grape. Okay, I love that for
Yeah,
him.
yeah, yeah. So, we negotiate all those things and you do kind of get to know them. You spend so
Yeah.
much time with them. Give me your story. Is there something that I can do for you as an offering, in exchange for your presence? Because reciprocity is a big thing,
Oh,
reciprocity and
yeah.
respect. And they might suggest something that they want. Rhiannon asked me to make her a leather pouch because that's part of her myth. There's a
Oh,
game that's played with a leather pouch, and so I handcrafted a leather pouch for Rhiannon.
oh, love that.
um, yeah, so different things like that. So during this process, in the lead up, like I mentioned, you get to know who they are versus who you are. And so when you're in the possessory state, if you're not 100% totally off and gone, you how and you'll have your own thoughts in your head just in daily life when you go about your
Mm,
life, right? And you
mhm.
kind of know that internal voice. Well, you'll end up having two internal voices at the same time. Like that's what
Yes.
it's like. And if you've done your work and you've done your study, you'll know the difference between the voices, like who is who.
I agree with that. I always preach meditation because with meditation, you get to know the inner mechanisms of your mind, right?
Mhm.
Like you get to know your own voice. And so when there is a foreign voice, you can very easily identify it because you know that that's not one of your normal thought patterns. So yeah, I think discernment is important. I think everybody needs to listen to Jamie and not me when it comes to this because I've always said I'm a little bit more reckless. Like I'm so reckless when it comes to this.
Yeah.
So go learn from Jamie, okay, how to be possessed properly.
Well, and I mean, and on the topic of discernment, like
Yeah.
I think it's still important as a magical practitioner to use your human discernment when a deity is speaking,
Sure.
especially if they're about to say something that could be potentially harmful to somebody. I mean, we always tell people, like in the way of the Weaver philosophy, we have a much more power with relationship than deity having power over, right?
Mm,
So in this sort of power with horizontal relationship, you can actually either choose not to open your mouth and say the thing that could hurt,
mhm.
or you can kind of have that little like split-second negotiation between the two voices in your head and say, hey, that's not really, you can't really frame it like that.
Sure.
And so they may choose to say it differently. It's not really it's not really that you're withholding information, but you're trying to mitigate harm. And
Mm,
that discernment develops over time. It's just something you kind of learn as you get more practice with doing it.
sure. You did mention that, I mean, working with gods, that is some big energy. Do you
Mhm.
feel like, how does the energy vary in ritual when you're channeling a god versus channeling an ancestor or maybe a lesser spirit of some sort? What do you find that I'm trying not to insert my own personal opinions here because I want to hear your thoughts first. So let me just put that question out there and then feel free to go for it.
Well, honestly, in transpossession, I really only do it with deities. Like if I'm
Mm,
just chatting with an ancestor, that's more of like like a mediumship channeling intuition kind of
right,
thing, right? Like
right.
I don't really let those types of non-corporeal beings like into my body.
It's not a
Um,
possession. Yeah.
yeah, it's not a possession. So honestly, what I tell people is, when that energy, what it can really feel like is so we have electricity in our homes, right? And we have transformers, we have like all the electrical systems in our home that take that pure energy and make it safe for it to be in the house so that it's not just like a lightning bolt or a fire. And having that experience of transpossession, if you're not prepared and the deity like really lands, it's kind of like putting your hand on a live wire, right? Like
Mm,
that's the voltage that you're getting. And so having someone sort of mentor you a little bit and working through the process and the lead up can help you, can help you before, during, and after so that you don't feel like you've just grabbed like a downed wire in a puddle. You know what I mean?
yeah. Absolutely. I've definitely noticed just in various rituals that I've participated in with lesser spirits or when I'm working with ancestors, it almost feels like, and I'm curious if you've had similar experiences. I know you don't work with them too much, it sounds like, but it feels like very pinpointed energy, as in this room, if I'm working with an ancestor, I can feel them like right here
Mhm.
versus in the entire room. But when you're working with a deity, they fill up the entire room, at least in my perception. And
Yeah.
the feeling is different. It's not this pinpointed spark of erratic energy that I would equate to like an ancestor or a lesser spirit. It's more so this, I don't want to say calm and subdued because that's not the right word, but this presence that fills up the entire room that is consistent and stable, as in like it's always the same energy, if that makes sense. It's not erratic, it's not flitting all over the place. So I don't know if you've experienced similar things working with gods.
No, I think that's a great way to put it. I would totally agree. Like an
Mm,
ancestor or a guardian spirit, a spirit of like land or place, a ghost even, they feel very specific.
mhm.
They're etheric, obviously, but they're very defined.
Sure, yes.
And when the gods descend, like it's like whoa, it's like
Yeah.
the entire ritual container is filled with their essence. It's just really big.
Yes. Okay, I'm so glad that I'm not alone in feeling that. So thank you for the
Mhm.
validation.
Yeah, it's okay.
All right, I've got just to kind of wrap up our conversation here. I do have three questions from some of my channel members that we can just rapid fire through real quick. This will be like our rapid fire Q&A round. So the first question is, how do we balance a practice rooted in a degree of reconstruction with our own UPG and alternative methods given the difference in time and place, especially in the case of Hades and the imperfect records? So I think this is really just talking about how to have like a reconstructionist practice and how to be valid in that. What is your advice if you have any?
So, if you pick up the book, I do go through in the introduction and tell people, look, I am a pagan polytheist. I'm a hard polytheist. It means that I believe in all the gods. I think they're
Mm,
all real. They all have their own sort of desires and purviews. I just work with a select few, one of them being Hades.
yeah.
And, I'm also an eclectic witch and I'm not a reconstructionist. So, what I do is I dig into mythology and dig into history so that I can pull things out that will help me draw the energy to me, right? So, if I can like pull anything out, like, this is how you make an offering to a chthonic god. This is like a plant that is associated with Hades. Then I can incorporate that into my own magical practice using the magical tech that I use. That's how I work with deities, right?
Mm,
And I think personal gnosis is important too, especially in your own like individual practice, anything that you might be doing on your own or with a small group. But it's important to remember that sometimes your UPG, your unverified personal gnosis, is just for you,
sure.
and is not necessarily a universal truth.
Yeah, I think that's great advice. It's just for you. Sometimes it doesn't need to be shared, and that's
Yeah.
fine. All right, second question I have for you. I am just starting to work with deity level spiritual energies. Due to religious trauma, I have not been able to conceive of repeating working with deities until very recently when the door opened. For newbies to this practice, what is something that is usually overlooked that could easily be avoided?
I think for the thing that I would say to remember is that you have agency just as the deity has agency, right?
Mm,
And consent is essential. And if you don't fully consent, then that's it.
hmm.
And you don't have to do something just because a deity asks you to. You can negotiate and or say no. I mean, do it politely, do it respectfully, just like you would do it in a human relationship. But you have just as much agency and power as any of these deities. It's a different kind, right? It's a different kind.
Mm,
But because a deity told me to do it is not an excuse for bad behavior. And it's not really something, it should be more of a relationship that has ebb and flow and, give and take and has like a natural sort of feeling to it. I think that, coming out of sort of a Christian overculture, we're tempted to be like, oh, the deities are here and we're down here. And that's not really my experience.
Hmm. I really like that perspective because I go back and forth all the time. I mean, between are the gods really up here and we're down here, and should we submit, or is this more of like a working relationship with a more equal reciprocity, I guess. So I like that perspective. All right, last question for you. I've been working with Persephone for years, but have only encountered Hades once. What is a good way to incorporate Hades when working with Persephone? Is there anything specific to their bond? Could they work in tandem to guide and strengthen romantic partnerships? Are there any lesser known or fun facts about? Oh, wow, this is a lot, actually. Sorry, I shouldn't have hit you with all these at once. Are there any lesser known or fun facts about the infamous due to the underworld? So we already hit on the last question, but if you want to talk about maybe how to incorporate Hades into Persephone rituals and
Yeah.
such, that would be great.
Yeah, so obviously Hades and Persephone are consorts, and one of the unique things about their relationship is that they're equals, which does not happen in Greek mythology. And it's like part of the reason why I love working with the underworld, because all of the normal rules are turned upside down or thrown out of the window in the underworld. So Persephone has like a lot of power when she's down there. I think, yeah, you could definitely ask them questions about relationships. They may or may not answer. I don't know.
Yeah.
But you can also work with them for fertility, and not just like fertility as if you wanted to have a baby. They're known to be the sort of the patron deities of a fertile harvest. And, Persephone, of course, represents the seed that goes underground, that comes up in the spring, that gets harvested in the fall to feed people and animals. Hades, the wealthy one, is known as the wealthy one not only because of the plethora of mortal shades in his realm, but also because Hades has dominion over everything beneath the surface of the earth. So the rich soil that grows the plants, all the precious resources that we use, minerals, stones, metals, all of those things are all related to Hades. So if you want to work with them as a couple, to sort of understand like how you can be more fertile in your endeavors, how you can plant seeds that will go strong, that will be nourished in rich soil. Metaphorically speaking, I think
Mhm.
that they would be really good deities to call upon for that.
I think that's a great answer. Good advice for these questions. Well, thank you so, so much, Jamie, for coming on and being willing to answer all these questions. Also, let's talk about your upcoming projects and where people can find you and all of those things because you teach people how to channel. You also have some teaching like workshops coming up or something, so feel free to take the floor and share whatever you want.
Yeah, thanks. So right now I'm actually working on two really exciting projects.
Mm.
They're both with Llewellyn. They won't be coming out for a while because I'm still in the writing process. But one is sort of a follow-up to Hades. It's tentatively titled One Foot in the Underworld, and it's about working magic with the dead and that threshold between living and dying. So that's cooking right now, as well as an underworld tarot. So it's based on the Rider-Waite-Smith, but it features the underworld of Greek mythology. So working on both of those, really
Oh,
excited about
okay. I'm
them.
so excited
Yeah.
about those. Oh, okay.
Yeah, yeah, really, really excited about those projects. And so my teaching collaboration, Way of the Weaver, it goes on all year long. So every summer we do a camp. We do Weaver Camp. It's the last week of June every summer. You can find out more details about that on the website, just wayoftheweaver.com. And we also do in the winter, we do online courses, and there's like 3 month online courses that meet every other week. And registration for that is going to open probably in October. But the one we're doing this winter, I'm really excited about. We're doing spells for the resistance. So
Mm. Yes. Yes. Oh my God.
yeah,
I'm so
so
excited for
how
that.
to take action in the world. So if you want to be notified about that kind of stuff, there you can just sign up for the Way of the Weaver newsletter or my own newsletter. It'll go out in both of them, and you can kind of keep your eyes open for that kind of stuff. And Way of the Weaver is great. We have a pretty generous sliding scale. We want to make it accessible for everybody. And as far as me, solo events, I'm going to be in Amityville New Jersey, and coming up in October 11th, I'm one of four speakers for the Alchemy Academy, which is something that the Amityville Apothecary hosts every year.
Oh,
And so there's three of us speak, or excuse me, four of us speaking, and I am particularly am talking about some of the things we talked about today. I'm going to be talking about working with the gods, how to do it, how to approach it, best practices, things like that. And that's
cool.
October 11th. There are tickets available online. And I think if you use the code alchemy, you'll get 15% off your ticket. So that's a cool thing coming up. Yeah,
Perfect.
that's really fun. And then after that, if you live in the South like I do, I am hoping, fingers crossed, that I'm going to be at Conjuration, which is just north of Atlanta. And it's a little 3 day kind of fandom, Comic-Con, magical sort of blended
Ooh,
event. And I'll be teaching some classes about like real witchcraft and stuff like that.
yeah.
So yeah, and if you want to follow me, I'm M as in Michelle. That's my middle name, JM Waggoner on all the socials. And on my link tree, if you check that out, I have files linked to all of the recent presentations I've done. So you can kind of explore some different things like tarot, circle casting, stuff about Hades. There's all kinds of good info on there, including a link to my podcast. Murphy and I podcast twice a month.
I just recently found your podcast and I've been binging it. So yeah, and I'll link all that stuff in the description box too. I want to make sure that I have all your socials on there, your book, and also that code that you mentioned for the 15% off for the tickets. I'll put all that in there. So perfect. Thank you so, so much, Jamie. I hope you all enjoyed this conversation. Definitely leave all the comments for Jamie down below and tell her how amazing she is because it was just so cool to talk to you. Talking to someone who channels is like, because I never get to talk about this kind of stuff. A lot of people don't do it. And it was really interesting hearing your perspective. So thank you so
Yeah.
much.
Oh, I'd love to do it again. This was really, really fun. I feel
Oh,
like I
good.
could talk to you all day. So
I know,
thanks.
same. I know. Thank you all for watching. I'll see you on another video very soon. Bye, everyone.